Item 4.2 on the agenda is a deputation on energy security. Mr. Gene Balfour, you'll have 5 minutes.
Okay, it's on. Hi, everybody. I want to start just by quickly just showing a nice picture of, this is Councillor Richardson. She's in her greenhouse. And I'm showing it because some of my talk is about greenhouses. And so I'm just happy to know that there's at least one member of council here that's directly related to having experience with a greenhouse. So I want to thank everybody for hearing my objections to council's apparent acceptance of the words climate change to signify a significant threat, one that automatically commands government action, legislation, and/or spending. I also am concerned when council votes in favor of jeopardizing our energy security whenever those magic words climate change are invoked. And the example is on August the 29th, two Kawartha Lakes Environmental Advisory Committee representatives made a deputation to this council asking council to oppose the expansion of gas plants in Ontario for reasons of climate change. Nothing specific about climate change, just climate change. And that was Report Plan 2023-04. So I hope council has rejected that request. So the purpose of this deputation, and I'm doing it on behalf of what a group called Advocates for Civil Society. So you've been in office now for more than a year, and we'd just like to satisfy ourselves that the constituents that council has the scientific knowledge to competently make decisions on our behalf regarding the hypothesis that climate change is a significant threat requiring government response. I'll refer to this as the climate change theory after this. To me, this is a question of public confidence in our elected representatives that they've got the knowledge to be able to make good decisions. To test your knowledge, I put together 3 questions. And it's also got to determine whether, these questions determine whether you're committing to make the constituents of Kawartha Lakes first in your priorities. And if you decide to answer these questions, please do so. I would like to see it, you could put it on our website, the Kawartha website, and any references to any publications from government institutions that only offer unsubstantiated claims would be inadmissible. I would be looking for a response with published scientific data to respond to these questions. So the questions are very simple. And the first one comes from claims that are associated with CO2 increases that cause forest fires. So according to the Ultimate CO2 Guide for In-House Growing, and that's a website I've included in my deputation, the optimal level of atmospheric CO2 for plant growth within a greenhouse ranges from 600 parts per million to 1,500 parts per million. The current levels in our atmosphere are 415 parts per million. And it's a magnitude, obviously, difference in terms of the amount. So I'd like to find out or ask council if they can answer the following question: how and why plants inside greenhouses do not burst into flames when CO2 levels exceed 600 parts per million? Because clearly, if they're saying that there's forest fires caused by increase in CO2, then obviously there must be some repercussions in actual greenhouses. Question number 2 relates to Antonio Guterres. He's the Secretary General of the United Nations. He recently made a public announcement, which we heard in a deputation in late August. We are entering the era of global boiling. So my question relates to, if I can get my pages working here, I'd like to understand why a pot of water doesn't begin to boil inside a greenhouse when CO2 levels reach 1,500 parts per million. Why not? Also, should we trust the United Nations, the IPCC, or any other global body when their leaders make such irresponsible claims like global boiling? Question number 3 is about energy security, which I define as reliable and affordable energy for everybody. And we know now, and I've got a whole list of references here that come with my deputation. We know that green energy sources cannot replace fossil fuels to meet our needs. That's a given. Politically, energy security is everyone's concern, 100% of us. And yet there's only a minority of people who actually believe that climate crisis is real. So will Council prioritize energy security above all else whenever unsubstantiated climate change proposals are presented to it? So I've got 6 proposals I'm offering to you right now. First is declare energy security as top priority over any proposals made that are based on the climate change theory. First proposal. Second is require proof. Reject climate change as this magic phrase that must automatically command your serious attention. Expect verifiable and specific scientific proof that any climate change proposal is taken seriously by a council. Third, stop spending now. We've already allocated all kinds of money towards this climate change thing, but we've done it without any proof. So don't spend any more time, money, or resources on any future subsequent submissions to council that allege climate change to be a problem. And I'm referring again to Plan 2023-04. Finally, represent 100% of your constituents, not just those who believe the climate change theory. Eliminate all ill-informed climate crisis based inside council. Make sure that things are only determined by scientific fact. As I said earlier, if you do decide to answer these things, please do it on our website so that we all know how deep your knowledge of climate science goes, and we have more confidence in your ability to make decisions on, quote, climate change. And finally, I'd like to suggest that I do a lot of reading in this area, and I know there's tons and tons of information out there. And so I'm going to suggest that everybody consider alternative points of view, not just the ones that are coming from the mainstream media, from IPCC, from the United Nations, from government sources. There's a lot of other very good sources out there. And so I've put together a list of only 10, which comes with this. You'll see them, and you can go through them and see what I've learned. So thanks very much.
Thank you. If you'd like to stay there and see if there are any questions.
Yeah.
Councillor Smeaton.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, through you. I wondered if you had a list of what you considered to be, you referred to the published scientific journals.
Yes.
That would be acceptable. You have that list. Is that part of those? That's not the same as those 10 readings that you have for us.
But there are plenty reputable, like Nature is a reputable one, but there's others as well. And there's in that list, there's several books. There's actually a Stephen Koonin, which is one of the best books that I've seen, and there's a lot of references in that, so I would recommend that you look at that book.
Okay, and so for me, when I hear your 3 points,
Yes.
the 3 questions you have of us, I can't help but be back in my teaching role,
Okay,
which I enjoyed a lot.
good.
And those types of questions would be how I would field, as Jolie knows, how I would field a classroom. Those would be the questions I would ask, but we would have curriculum delivered that suggests global warming, some of the impacts that you're refuting. And then those types of questions I would present, and the students would engage in conversation because it's important to see, as you put, as much exponential theory as possible, really that type of thinking and challenging the
Yes.
norms and whatever. So my question that I have is, have you ever hosted or thought about hosting a forum with, say, grade 12 students, where it's in a gymnasium, in a school where you know the audience is going to have had curriculum delivered to them that has the research supporting, as you know how I feel.
Yes.
And you're on the podium, and those questions that will be challenging from students who've learned so much, like my classroom was, would be able to be asked of you. So you would say, here's my 3 questions of you.
Yes.
And they've had a month ahead of time to come up with their answers. Some may agree with you, some wouldn't. Has a forum like that ever happened so that I could see the community engaged, not just at City Hall, but the community engaged in answering you, whether it be favorable to you or not?
Yep.
I wondered if that's ever happened, or if you've considered it, or...
I would be happy to do that, but I have a better idea. I'd like right now, in this deputation, I know that the person who's the strongest advocate for climate change as a crisis is Councillor Warren. I would like right now to invite Councillor Warren to be in a public forum and debate climate change with me. I think that would get a much broader exposure, and if she's got the expertise that she seems to have, then it would be a perfect opportunity to show all 78,000 members of this city that she has the expertise to make the kind of judgments that we expect from her. So that's why I'm asking her to do it, because she seems to be the one out of all of you that seems to have the strongest belief in that system. And by the way, I'm not a climate change denier. I wrote a book, and the book is about climate change, and it was published earlier this year. And in that book, I identified 3 types of people. I identified regarding climate change. One type of person is somebody who believes that climate change is a serious matter, and they lobby the government and try to get legislation passed to impose that view on everybody else. That's one type of person. The other kind of person is skeptical. They look at the information, they look at the science, as I've done, and I say, I have not been convinced that there's a serious enough crisis that it requires government action, at least the kinds that we're seeing today. So that's a skeptical group. And then there's a third group that they don't really care. I call them the agnostics. And the agnostics are people who go about their daily business. It's a topic they hear about, but they don't waste any sleep over it. And I couldn't tell you how those 3 groups break down. I don't know for sure. I know there's a lot of students have gone through our public system in recent years, and they've been convinced by their teachers that there's a serious crisis. And so I expect that there's a lot of young people who really believe there's a crisis only because the propaganda has been fed to them. But they haven't really gone into and done the critical thinking and the investigation, like Stephen Koonin in his book, to look at it from many, many vantage points. And that's all I'm trying to do, and which is why I've offered to have a public forum.
You can put your request in writing and send it to Councillor Warren, and she will deal with it as she feels she should. Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Balfour. Thanks for your presentation. And one of the things that you had said, like, it's important that I know with myself, like I listen to people on all sorts of political spectrum. The beauty of municipal politics is that you listen to left, center, and right, and that's who you represent. But I listen to and I read websites all over the world. I'll read Fox News, I'll read CNN, I'll read Newsmax, I'll read the India Times, New Zealand Herald, I read the Toronto Star, which actually has some very good investigative reporters. So I read the whole gamut. But what my thing is, and it's important that you read both sides of everything. What I was going to ask you there is that, in your opinion, we're talking about energy self-sufficiency in Canada. I know we import a tremendous amount of oil that we could be using ourselves. I think it's around 650,000 barrels a day. And I've been to these oil fields in Canada, several provinces. Just a few months ago, I was in Manitoba, and a lot of the surface pump jacks there that these are local farmers that have their own pump jacks and they're self-sufficient. They contribute to our economy. So the emissions, when we talk about emissions, I'll just narrow it down to that. Like I find that, we've made such tremendous progress in vehicles with emissions, even, diesel, gasoline powered emissions, that you don't see these hazy days that you used to see 20 years ago. But the emissions, have you studied a lot of that as well? Like the improvements that we've made with emissions in vehicles and internal combustion engines? And just a question on that, but thanks for your presentation.
Thanks for the question. I haven't studied automotive emissions other than looking at the emissions of CO2. More because I'm concerned about carbon taxes. Tiff Macklin, the governor of the Bank of Canada, recently said a couple of days ago that if you eliminated all carbon taxes in this country, you would cut inflation by 16%. That's a lot of money. And right now, one of the biggest crises that all of you and all of us are facing is the high cost of living. That's the biggest problem. So I focused on, I've done a fair bit of investigation. I have a Bachelor of Science degree. I'm a very, very inquisitive guy around science topics. I've been doing it for years. I know that this atmosphere in this room, you probably know it's 78% nitrogen, N2. You know that it's 21% oxygen. It's 0.9% argon. And CO2 is 215 parts for every million atmospheric molecules in this room. 415 of them are CO2. And those have increased over the last 200 years by 150 parts. So When people tell me that increase over 200 years is somehow affecting something called global warming, and the global temperature that's not a real thing, by the way. Global temperature is a construct of statistics. It's an averaging of measurements of atmospheric temperature. And so I've studied statistics. So if you put a scattergram up front and you show the scattergram of every instance of measurement of temperature, you'd find a broad bell curve, and in the middle you'd find your average, and that's what we call global warming. But it's a statistical average, and if you look at the span of those statistics and how broad they were, you would probably find that outside of the mean, there's probably a variance of at least 5 degrees on both sides. So we're not talking about something that's real, that's measurable. Global warming or global temperature is not real and measurable unless you aggregate it, and that's what they do. So we need to be talking about things that are real, not fictions like words like climate change that are nothing more than a catch-all to scare people. We don't need to scare kids. We don't need to go to our classrooms and tell kids that the world can come to an end because we're burning too much fossil fuel. And then we turn around and say, well, we got to stop doing that. And then somebody else says, well, if you get rid of the fossil fuel, you know what you're going to do? You're going to destroy the economy and you won't have any future jobs. So, we got to get this right. And that's why I'm here today. I'm here because I want to know that every one of you, all 9 of you, when you get a statement that climate change is causing all kinds of crises, let's get this right. Let's not just believe the magic of those 2 words. Let's start digging down and finding out what the truth is and what specific problems we're trying to solve. You can't solve specific problems without knowing what they are first. So that's what I'm recommending.
Okay.
Thank you. Can I have
Any more?
a motion to receive the deputation, please? Councillor Joyce, Councillor Ashmore, all in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.